The fake wedding that saved a fortune. How a poor maid exposed a billionaire's contract of lies. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The night rain fell hard against the glass walls of Vona Estate, each drop streaking down like silver tears. Inside, beneath the chandelier's cold glow, Lena Morales stood in her fading maid uniform, clutching the strap of her worn leather bag. She had just been dismissed for overhearing something she should not. The words still echoed in her ears when the billionaire himself entered the room. Adrian Vaughn, 35, sharp suit, sharper eyes. He was the kind of man who carried power like armor. Tonight, though, that armor looked cracked. He tossed a folder onto the marble desk between them. "Sit down," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but something in it trembled. Lena hesitated. "Mr. Vaughn, if this is about, it is about saving my company," he interrupted. "And maybe saving your family, too." He opened the folder. Inside lay a legal document stamped in gold ink, a marriage contract. Lena blinked, confused. "A marriage, what?" "A contract," Adrian repeated. 6 months. You marry me on paper to keep control of my hotels until the board election. In return, I will pay off your mother's hospital debt, your brother's tuition, and give you $500,000 when it ends." For a moment, all she could hear was the clock ticking behind him. The offer sounded insane, too cruel, too convenient, too real. "Why me?" she finally whispered. He looked up, his gaze steady. "Because you are invisible. No one would suspect you. You are honest, poor, and you have nothing to lose." Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to say no, to walk out of that golden cage before the door closed. But the image of her mother lying in a hospital bed flashed behind her eyes, the IV tubes, the quiet beeping, the bill she could never pay. Her hands trembled. "You do not even know me." "I know desperation when I see it," he said softly, "and I know integrity. That is why I am asking you." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Finally, Lena lifted her chin. "I will do it," she said, her voice breaking but clear. Adrian nodded once. He reached for a pen, his movements precise, mechanical. She signed her name beneath his, her hand shaking as the ink dried black against gold. He slid a velvet box toward her. Inside was a simple ring, silver with a single small diamond. "Wear this tomorrow," he said. "The world needs to believe it is real." Lena stared at the ring, the symbol of a lie that might save her world. She slipped it onto her finger, its weight strange and cold. "Welcome to the deal, Mrs. Vaughn," Adrian said quietly. The words hung between them like a promise and a curse, echoing through the empty hall as the storm outside swallowed the night. The morning after the storm, the Vaughn estate looked almost unreal in the sunlight. The marble floors shone, and the air smelled faintly of lavender polish. Yet inside, Lena Morales stood before a mirror, her eyes fixed on the silver ring that now glimmered on her finger. Every part of her body still trembled with disbelief. She was married, at least on paper, to Adrian Vaughn, the billionaire who had just changed her entire life overnight. Downstairs, the long dining table stretched like a runway of crystal and silver. Adrian sat at the far end, reading the morning paper, his expression unreadable. When Lena entered, every maid and butler stopped moving. The silence was sharp enough to cut. "Good morning," she said softly. Adrian folded the paper, his tone polite but distant. "Good morning, Mrs. Vaughn. Sit. There are things we must clarify." A thin folder lay beside his coffee cup, her copy of the contract. He opened it and began to read the clauses aloud, each word clipped and cold. "Clause 1, he said, "You will accompany me to 5 official events. Clause 2, you will live here at Vona Estate, but we will not share a room. Clause 3, our arrangement remains confidential. Clause 4, when the term ends in 6 months, you will receive the agreed payment, and we will part ways." Lena listened quietly, her hands folded on her lap. The sound of the clock ticking filled the space between them. "Do you understand everything?" he asked. "I do," she replied. "But you forgot something." Adrian looked up. "What is that?" You never mentioned what happens if one of us breaks the rules. He studied her, the corner of his mouth lifting faintly. Then the contract dissolves, and the consequences will depend on who breaks it first. The air between them tightened. Lena nodded once, forcing herself to sound calm. Then I will not break it. Good, he said, and pushed the folder toward her. Sign the final acknowledgement, and our arrangement becomes official under law. Her pen scratched the paper. The ink glistened briefly before sinking in. When she finished, Adrian extended his hand. For a second, she hesitated, then placed hers in his. His handshake was firm, professional, without warmth but not unkind. You may inform your mother that her hospital bills have been settled, he said. A car will take you to visit her this afternoon. Her breath caught. You already paid? I keep my promises, Mrs. Vaughn. You should learn to do the same. He stood, gathering his jacket. You will meet my public relations manager at 3. She will prepare you for the first event tonight. As he walked away, Lena remained seated, her fingers brushing the contract pages. The scent of coffee and ink mixed in the air, grounding her in the impossible truth. She was now part of a life she did not belong to. Through the tall windows, she watched him step into a black limousine that disappeared down the long driveway. He looked untouchable, like someone carved from glass and distance. Lena exhaled slowly. 6 months, she whispered. Just 6 months. But somewhere deep inside, under the fear and the bargain, another feeling began to stir, an uneasy curiosity about the man who had just bought her silence and, without realizing it, might have sold a piece of his own heart. That afternoon, Lena Morales found herself standing in front of a wall-sized mirror while 2 stylists circled her like hawks. The mansion's guest suite had been transformed into a private dressing room. Racks of gowns shimmered beneath soft white lights. Lena had never seen so much silk in one place, and now every inch of it belonged to a world she did not understand. Raise your chin, Mrs. Vaughn, one stylist said, adjusting a strand of her dark hair. You must hold your posture like you are already used to attention. She tried, but the high heels felt like traps, and the diamond earrings weighed more than they should have. At 3 o'clock sharp, Clara Benton, Adrian's public relations manager, entered the room. She was elegant, composed, and clearly in charge. Let us begin with basics, Clara said. You are no longer a maid. You are Mrs. Adrian Vaughn, wife of the CEO of Vaughn International Hotels. People will test you. They will look for cracks. Your job is to make sure they find none. Lena swallowed hard. And if they do? Clara smiled slightly. Then the tabloids will destroy you before breakfast. By evening, the transformation was complete. Lena wore a champagne-colored gown that caught the light with every breath. Her reflection in the mirror was unrecognizable, her hair swept into an elegant bun, her lips painted in soft rose. Yet behind the glamour, her eyes still carried the same uncertainty. The first gala began at 7. The limousine glided through the city lights, its tinted windows reflecting the skyline. Adrian sat beside her in a tailored black suit, his expression unreadable as always. You look different, he said finally. I hope that is a good thing, she replied quietly. It will have to be, he said, not looking at her. Tonight the entire board will be watching. The car stopped before the Crystal Tower, a glass fortress glittering against the night sky. Cameras flashed as soon as they stepped out. Adrian offered his arm. For a moment, she hesitated, then placed her hand lightly on it. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers blazed above a sea of tuxedos and jewels. The scent of perfume and expensive champagne filled the air. Conversations fell silent as they entered. That is Adrian Vaughn's new wife, someone whispered. The maid? You are kidding. Lena heard every word. Her palms grew damp, but she kept her chin high. Adrian led her toward a group of board members. One of them, a woman in a silver dress, smiled with thin politeness. Mrs. Vaughn, I heard you were once part of the staff here. How refreshing. Lena felt the insult under the smile. For a heartbeat, she froze. Then she looked the woman straight in the eye. Yes, she said calmly. I was a maid. I still know how to clean up a mess if someone makes one. The surrounding guests laughed softly. Adrian's gaze flickered toward her, surprise breaking through his usual composure. Well played, he murmured under his breath. Hours later, when the music softened and the crowd thinned, Adrian stood with her near the balcony. City lights stretched below them like a living map. You handled yourself better than I expected, he said quietly. "Thank you," she replied. "I have had practice pretending I belong somewhere." For the first time, a faint warmth crossed his face, almost a smile. "Keep that spirit. You will need it." As the limousine carried them back to the mansion, Lena watched the rain begin again, streaking the glass like in the night they first met. The ring on her finger caught the light, glinting with every movement. 6 months had begun, and the game between them had only just started. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that did not feel real. Every morning, Lena Morales woke up in a guest suite larger than the entire apartment she once rented with her mother. Every evening, she attended dinners, charity events, and business functions, always at Adrian Vaughn's side. To the outside world, they looked like a perfect couple, powerful, graceful, untouchable. But inside the mansion's tall stone walls, they were strangers bound by paper and silence. One night, after yet another dinner filled with polite smiles and rehearsed answers, Lena found herself walking through the library. The air smelled of old leather and cedar. Rows of books climbed toward the ceiling, and behind the heavy drapes, the city lights flickered like distant stars. She did not expect to see Adrian there. He sat alone near the fireplace, his tie loosened, his eyes fixed on a framed photograph. "I thought you went to your study," she said quietly. He did not look up. "I come here when I need to think." Lena stepped closer. "Who is in the picture?" He turned the frame toward her. A man stood beside a younger Adrian, smiling proudly. "My father," he said. "He built this company from nothing. The board wants to sell it piece by piece, but his name is on every door. I will not let them destroy it." The firelight drew soft lines across his face, revealing exhaustion she had never noticed before. "You care about it more than yourself," she said. Adrian's jaw tightened. "When you grow up with nothing, you learn to hold on to what you build, maybe too tightly." He leaned back, eyes distant. "Do you regret saying yes that night?" Lena hesitated. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been if I had walked away. But then I remember my mother is breathing easier, and my brother is back in school. So, no, I do not regret it." Adrian nodded slowly. "You remind me of him," he said. "My father used to say integrity is the rarest form of courage." She smiled faintly. "He sounds like a man who would have liked you better before the suit and the empire." That made him laugh, quietly, like a sound he had forgotten how to make. Outside, thunder rolled again, echoing through the glass ceiling. The storm had returned, the same as the night they signed their names. Lena turned to leave, but Adrian's voice stopped her. "Lena," he said, "if this arrangement ever becomes too heavy, you can end it. No payment, no penalty." She looked back at him, surprised. "Why would you say that?" "Because I know what it feels like to be trapped in something that looks perfect from the outside." For a moment, they stood in silence, two souls who had traded freedom for duty. Then she nodded once, her voice steady. "I will keep my promise, Mr. Vaughn. 6 months, no matter how it feels." End of. He held her gaze, something unspoken passing between them, a flicker of warmth, or warning, or both. Later that night, alone in her room, Lena traced the edge of the ring around her finger. The diamond glimmered faintly in the dark. It had started as a symbol of survival, but now it felt heavier, more complicated, like a secret that could not decide if it was meant to protect or destroy. Down the hall, Adrian watched the rain from his window. He thought of the woman who had agreed to marry him without love, and realized that, for the first time in years, someone inside his house had spoken to him like he was human, and that frightened him more than losing the empire ever could. The following month brought the biggest challenge of their agreement yet. Vaughn International was hosting its annual charity gala, a televised event filled with politicians, investors, and journalists. It was the perfect opportunity for Adrian Vaughn to secure his position as CEO and the perfect opportunity for others to expose his fake marriage. That afternoon, Lena Morales sat before the vanity mirror in her suite, while Clara, the public relations manager, reviewed a list of questions reporters might ask. "Remember," Clara said, tapping the paper. "Smile, speak clearly, and never contradict Mr. Vaughn. You are a symbol tonight, not a story." Lena nodded. She had worn 1,000 masks in her life. This one just sparkled more than the rest. When the clock struck 7, the limousine doors opened to a wall of camera flashes. Adrian stepped out first, offering his hand. Lena followed, wrapped in a gown of midnight blue that shimmered with every flash of light. "Smile," he whispered, his hand firm on hers. "I am trying." she murmured back. They moved through the crowd like two magnets forced to attract. Inside the grand ballroom, the chandelier lights burned bright enough to make the diamonds on every wrist look like fire. Halfway through the evening, Adrian was called to the stage for a speech. Lena remained at the table, surrounded by board members and executives. Among them sat Victoria Vaughn, Adrian's ambitious cousin, whose sharp smile hid sharper intentions. "Mrs. Vaughn," Victoria said sweetly, swirling the wine in her glass, "it is fascinating how quickly you adapted to this life. Some people spend years trying to marry into it." Lena felt the sting beneath the politeness. "Some people spend their lives serving it," she replied calmly. "Maybe that teaches them more about character than wealth ever could." The nearby guests murmured with interest. Victoria's smile thinned, but she said nothing more. On stage, Adrian began to speak about his father's legacy and the future of the company. His voice was steady, commanding, yet as his eyes swept the crowd, they landed on Lena for a brief moment. Her expression was proud, not fearful, and for the first time, he realized she was not pretending. When the speech ended, the applause thundered. Adrian stepped down and joined her again. "What did my cousin say to you?" he asked quietly. "Nothing worth remembering," Lena said, "but I think she wanted to see if I would break." "Did you?" She smiled faintly. "Not tonight." Ugh. Before he could respond, a reporter approached with a microphone. "Mr. Vaughn, Mrs. Vaughn, just one quick question. People are calling your marriage sudden, even secretive. What do you say to those who believe it is a business arrangement?" Lena froze for a heartbeat. Adrian glanced at her, waiting. She could lie, as the contract required, or she could speak with truth that would not destroy them. She took a slow breath and said, "My husband and I may not have the kind of beginning that people expect, but sometimes the most unexpected unions can protect something worth fighting for." The reporter blinked, surprised by her composure. "So you are saying it is real?" Lena met Adrian's gaze. "I am saying it matters." The answer was simple, but it changed everything. The cameras caught it, the audience felt it, and for the first time since the night of the storm, Adrian saw something in her that could not be scripted conviction. Later, as they left the ballroom, he held her arm a moment longer than necessary. "You handled that well," he said softly. Lena looked up at him. "It is easier to tell the truth when it sounds like a lie no one believes." Adrian did not reply. But as the car drove away, he turned to the window, watching her reflection beside his. The line between the deal they signed and the life they were living had begun to blur, and neither of them knew how to stop it. The days after the charity gala felt strangely quiet. The tabloids were still buzzing about Adrian Vaughn's new wife, but inside the estate, silence had replaced tension. The air no longer felt as heavy as before. Something had shifted, something neither of them wanted to name. One evening, Lena returned from visiting her mother at the hospital. The doctors said her recovery was progressing faster than expected, and Lena carried that relief with her as she stepped into the dimly lit foyer. Adrian was there, standing near the staircase with his jacket slung over one shoulder. "How is she?" he asked. "Better," Lena replied. She smiled today. She said the nurses keep asking about her daughter who married a billionaire. Adrian smiled faintly, almost shyly. "Then I am glad to be useful for once." They both laughed softly, the sound echoing against marble and memory. Later that night, a sudden power outage swept through the mansion. The lights flickered, then went out completely. Lena found herself wandering through the dark halls with only the faint glow of a candle. Somewhere near the study, she heard Adrian's voice. "Are you all right?" he asked, emerging from the shadows. His white shirt caught the candlelight, his features softened by the warm glow. "I think so," she said, smiling nervously. "It feels like the whole house is holding its breath." He took the candle from her hand and placed it on the table. "Stay here. The generator will start soon." But when thunder cracked outside and the rain began to hammer against the windows, neither of them moved. The quiet between them was not awkward anymore. It was electric. "I used to hate storms," Lena said. "They reminded me of everything I could not control." Adrian's voice was low. "And now I think they remind me that sometimes chaos can clear the air." Their eyes met in the flickering light, and for a moment, the world outside the mansion disappeared. Adrian reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch lingered longer than it should have. "Lena," he said softly, "I told myself this would stay simple." "It never does," she whispered. The lights returned suddenly, breaking the spell. They stepped apart, each pretending not to notice how their hearts had changed rhythm. The next morning, Lena found a note on her breakfast tray. The handwriting was unmistakably his. Lunch at the vineyard. Noon. The estate's private vineyard stretched across the rolling hills behind the main house. The sky was bright, the air sweet with the scent of grapes. Adrian was already there, leaning against the fence, his sleeves rolled up, looking more human than she had ever seen him. "I used to come here with my father," he said. "He said wine takes patience. You cannot rush what needs time to mature." Lena smiled. "Maybe that is true for people, too." He turned to her, the sunlight catching the edge of his smile. "Do you ever wish you could start over, without contracts or expectations?" She hesitated. "Every day. But starting over is a luxury poor people cannot afford." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe I am the one who is poor." She did not answer, but something inside her softened completely. As they walked back toward the house, the distance between them felt smaller, the silence warmer. The ring on her finger no longer felt like a chain, it felt like a question neither of them dared to ask. That night, for the first time since the wedding, Lena fell asleep not as a maid pretending to be a wife, but as a woman who was beginning to understand the cost of honesty and the danger of falling in love with a man who had never learned how to be free. 2 months later, the mansion no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a strange kind of home. Lena Morales had learned which corridors creaked, which window caught the morning sun, and which corner of the garden Adrian Vaughn disappeared to when he needed silence. They had built an unspoken rhythm, shared glances across long meetings, quiet dinners without reporters, and moments when laughter escaped before either of them could stop it. But peace in the Vaughn estate never lasted long. One morning, Lena entered the drawing room to find Victoria Vaughn waiting for her. The cousin's smile was polite, but her eyes burned cold. "Mrs. Vaughn," Victoria began, rising gracefully, "I was hoping to have a word with you before the board meeting tonight." Lena folded her hands, careful and calm. "Of course. What is this about?" Victoria walked slowly around the room, trailing her fingers along the piano keys. "It is fascinating, really. A maid signs a marriage contract with a billionaire, and somehow the world believes it is love." She turned, her smile sharp. "But lies have an expiration date." Lena's stomach tightened. "What are you implying?" Victoria lifted a thin folder from her purse and dropped it onto the table. Inside were printed copies of financial statements, donations, transactions, property transfers. "Your name appears on documents you never signed," Victoria said. "Someone is using your account to move company funds. When the board sees this, they will not call you Mrs. Vaughn anymore. They will call you the reason Adrian loses his empire." Lena stared at the papers, her pulse pounding. "This is not possible. I have never touched those files." "Perhaps," Victoria said smoothly, "but the signature matches yours. I wonder how long it will take for your husband to believe otherwise." That night, the board meeting turned into chaos. Adrian sat at the head of the long glass table, the documents spread before him. The directors whispered, exchanging knowing looks. Victoria's voice carried across the room. "Adrian, your wife has been transferring funds from the company's charity accounts. I suggest you handle this before the shareholders do." Adrian looked at Lena, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "Tell me this is not true." "It is not," she said, her voice trembling. "I have never seen those papers until today." Victoria slid forward a page with Lena's forged signature. "Then explain this." Lena's throat tightened. She could not. Her hands shook as she tried to speak, but the words fell apart. Adrian's expression hardened, his silence cutting deeper than any accusation. "Meeting adjourned," he said coldly. "Everyone out." When the room emptied, he turned to her. "If this is your idea of loyalty, you have a strange way of showing it." "Adrian, please, someone set me up," she said desperately. "You know I would never—" "I thought I did," he interrupted. "But I have been wrong before." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with betrayal. She reached for him, but he stepped back. "Do not," he said quietly. "I cannot look at you right now." Lena felt the air leave her lungs. "So that is it? You would rather believe a lie than me?" He turned away. "You signed a contract, Mrs. Vaughn, not a vow." The words broke her. She left the mansion that night with only the ring on her finger and the copy of the contract she had kept hidden in her drawer. Outside, rain poured down just like the night they first met. The limousine was gone, the lights of the estate fading behind her, As she walked down the empty road, soaked to the bone, she whispered to herself, "If he will not fight for the truth, I will." Somewhere deep inside, beneath the heartbreak, a spark of defiance began to burn. She had signed that contract to survive, but now she would use it to expose the real lie that threatened them both. For 3 days, Lena Morales disappeared from the Vaughn estate. The media whispered about scandal and betrayal, while inside the boardroom, Adrian Vaughn faced the storm alone. His lawyers spoke in circles, the investors grew restless, and Victoria smiled through it all like a predator who had already won. But Lena was not running. She was searching. She went from one law office to another, tracing signatures and timestamps. Every forged transfer had something small but familiar, a pattern of initials, a sequence of numbers. It led her to an accounting firm that handled Vaughn International's internal audits. There, she found the proof. Hidden among stacks of archived reports, a digital copy of the real contract surfaced, the one she and Adrian had signed the night of the storm. It was untouched, still sealed with the original notary code. And it showed one thing Victoria had not expected, a second clause, handwritten by Adrian himself. In the event of internal sabotage, this contract will serve as evidence of the witness's good faith. Lena stared at the words, tears of fury and relief filling her eyes. Adrian had unknowingly protected her, even when he no longer believed her. That evening, as the board gathered for what Victoria called an emergency leadership vote, the heavy doors of the conference room swung open. Every head turned. Lena stepped inside, her clothes still damp from the rain, a folder clutched in her hand. The cameras flashed as reporters whispered from the hallway. "I am sorry to interrupt," she said steadily, her voice cutting through the chatter. "But before you decide who owns this company, you should know who tried to steal it." Victoria stood, her confidence cracking for the first time. "You have no authority here." Lena placed the folder on the table. "Maybe not, but the truth does." Adrian looked up from his seat, stunned. "Lena, what are you doing?" "Finishing what we started," she said. She opened the folder and spread the documents across the table, the original contract, the notary seal, and the digital timestamp. Then she displayed the forged transfers side by side. "Every signature that framed me came from this office," she said, pointing at the audit stamp. "The same office that manages Victoria Vaughn's private accounts. And this clause," she turned to Adrian, "proves that you wrote a safeguard to protect against exactly this." The boardroom erupted. Lawyers leaned over the papers, whispering. The chairman raised his voice, demanding verification. Within minutes, the company's legal counsel confirmed it. The evidence was authentic. Victoria's face went pale. "You cannot prove—" Lena's voice rose, firm and fearless. "You used my name to steal from your own family. I was poor, but I was never corrupt. You wanted to destroy me because I reminded you that money is not the same as worth." Adrian stood slowly, his chair scraping the floor. "Get out, Victoria," he said quietly, "before I make this official." Security stepped forward. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but no one argued. When the doors closed behind his cousin, Adrian turned to Lena. His voice was low, rough with guilt. "I should have trusted you." Lena exhaled, the weight of days collapsing into a single breath. "Trust is earned, Adrian, but so is forgiveness." He nodded, the lines in his face softening. "Then let me start earning it now." The room fell silent. Cameras clicked, and whispers spread through the hallways. But Lena no longer cared. Justice had been done. Outside, the storm had finally passed. The first light of morning broke through the clouds, spilling across the marble floor. Lena looked out the window at the city below, then at the man beside her, the one who had once doubted her, but who had also unknowingly written her salvation. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe the contract that began as a lie was leading them towards something real. A week later, peace returned to the Vaughn estate for the first time in years. The storm of headlines had faded, the board had stabilized, and Adrian Vaughn had reclaimed his company. Yet the mansion that once felt cold and echoing now held a quieter kind of tension, one born not from anger, but from everything left unsaid. Lena Morales stood by the grand window in the library, watching sunlight spill across the gardens. Her reflection looked calmer, older somehow, as if the past few months had aged her in ways no one could see. The ring was still on her finger, but the contract it represented had expired. 6 months had passed. Behind her, Footsteps approached. She turned to find Adrian standing in the doorway, his usual confidence softened by something gentler. "You plan to leave without saying goodbye," he said quietly. Lena smiled faintly. "The contract is finished, Mr. Vaughn. You have your company back. My promise is complete." He took a slow breath and stepped closer. "Then let me offer you another one. No signatures, no clauses, no deadlines." Adrian. He held out a small velvet box, the same one that once carried the fake wedding ring. But this time, inside was a new ring, simple, elegant, golden in the morning light. "I spent years believing loyalty could be bought," he said. "Then you proved that the only thing worth keeping is trust. I want to build something real with you, not because I need to, but because I want to." Lena's eyes shimmered, her voice unsteady. "You do not owe me anything." He shook his head. "You are wrong. I owe you honesty. I owe you the truth that I should have spoken months ago. When you walked out that night, I realized the empire meant nothing without the person who helped me save it." She looked down at the new ring, then back at him. "And what if I say yes? What happens to the man who made me sign a contract for love?" Adrian smiled softly. "Then he spends the rest of his life proving he does not need one." Lena hesitated, the echo of every hardship flickering behind her eyes: poverty, humiliation, fear. Then she placed her hand in his. "All right," she whispered. "But this time I am not signing anything." He laughed quietly, the sound genuine and free. "Then say it instead." She looked at him, her heart steady for the first time. "I love you, Adrian Vaughn." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for once, it felt weightless. Outside, the sun rose higher, glinting through the glass just as it had on the day she first wore the fake one. But now, the light felt different, warmer, honest, alive. Later that afternoon, the two of them walked through the vineyard where they had once spoken about patience. Adrian stopped, looking out at the rows of vines, shimmering in gold. "My father used to say a good harvest depends on care and timing," he said. "Maybe love is the same." Lena smiled. "Then we are right on time." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind carrying the faint scent of grapes and rain. Somewhere behind them, the mansion that had once been built on distance now echoed with laughter. The story that began with a contract ended with a choice, two people who had tested each other, hurt each other, and finally learned that love is not something written on paper. It is something lived, proven, and renewed every single day. As the screen faded to white, a final line appeared. "Real love needs no signature, only courage to begin again."